Joe Biden joined the Today Show where he was asked about Bernie Sanders. Now, there is a lot to actually discuss from this clip, so let's get to it.
Your delegate lead at last check was somewhere around 313. Most experts believe that's insurmountable. I know that you've talked to Senator Sanders recently by phone. Did you suggest to him that it was time to get out of this thing?
No, I wouldn't presume to do that, and I really mean it. It's a hard decision, and Bernie has a lot of really devoted followers. It's a difficult decision to make, but it's his to make. I'm not going to suggest what he should do.
You did make some headlines a few weeks ago when you said that your number two would likely be a female,
yes,
likely female of color.
And it was advised by people who have done this before that, in fact, we should start this sometime in April in order to be able to get it done in time. And so I explained to Bernie that I was doing that, but it wasn't, I hope he wasn't insulted by my taking anything for granted. And he said he understood fully. But I've begun the process. We haven't gotten the final names. We haven't even selected the final detail of who will be on the committee, who will oversee the committee, and how it will function like every vice presidential selection team has done, at least going back to both the Bushes and Clinton, et cetera.
Did Senator Sanders provide input on a possible VP pick?
No, he didn't. But as I said, the context was not was I talking to him about who I should pick or whether I should pick. It's anything like that. Look, Bernie has an incredible following. Bernie's one of probably a half a dozen people in American history who may not be the nominee, but has had an impact on American politics in a significant way, in a positive way. And so if I'm the nominee, I can tell you one thing, I would very much want Bernie to be part of the journey, not as a vice presidential nominee, but just engaging in all the things that he's worked so hard to do, many of which I agree with.
So it's clear here that Joe Biden is taking a kinder tone. He is attempting here rhetorically to be open to the Bernie Sanders base, the more, I would say, working class base. Looking at actual data, Bernie's support base is more working class, more people of color, younger especially. Now, the issue here is in the substance. So it's nice to say that you want Bernie to be part of the journey. What does that mean? The journey to the White House and then forget about him? Or once you're in, is he going to be part of that journey? So this is the major difference between Biden voters and Bernie voters in the primary. Biden voters, by and large, I'm not talking about the millionaires on television or his, people that are in fossil fuels or big pharma that support him. I'm talking about the average Biden voter. They support him because of character. They like Joe Biden as a person. They like who they see. They know he was Obama's VP. He's already been there. That's good enough for them. Point being, they don't care about the policy. They don't care about the details. Bernie's voters, they care about the details. They care about what you're going to fight for. They care about the policy. So when it comes to something like personnel decisions, who is in your administration, who is your vice president, those things matter more to Bernie supporters than Biden supporters. And it's not even just about Bernie voters. It's about working class voters, people that don't normally vote in general. About 40% of Americans don't normally vote. The way you speak to those people, a lot of those people, younger people, working class people, the way you speak to them is with some actual substance. Something that they know that if you're in, their lives will benefit materially. There will be material benefits to their lives based on the things that you are fighting for as president. So you're not going to win a lot of these voters, a lot of these potential, again, 40% of the country, you're not going to win a lot of these people over if you aren't willing to fight for them, if you don't have some real points on the board. And that includes the people that are around you, the people that we can actually know that we can trust in terms of who's going to fight for these issues. So something like vice president, he said he didn't talk to Bernie Sanders about the vice president. He should. The vice president matters here. Anina Turner or Rashida Tlaib as vice president, somebody like that, somebody who endorsed Bernie Sanders, but then Biden has them as his vice president, that is how you can potentially win some of these voters over. And that's just the vice president. You also got to talk about the cabinet. You have to ensure that nobody from Wall Street or fossil fuels is in your cabinet. Like, this is just the baseline of what should be required right now. Because again, the Bernie voters and the working class voters, they care about the substance. Biden voters, they're going to vote for Joe Biden in November because they want to vote against Donald Trump. They don't care who the Democratic nominee is. I mean, this was a big part of the reason why Bernie Sanders is the more electable candidate, because his voters do care who the nominee is. So Biden voters, by and large, would go out and vote for Bernie Sanders as the nominee regardless. But Bernie voters, not the same, especially because a lot of them didn't vote during their primary. We're talking about a lot of young people that would vote in a general election, but didn't vote in the primary for whatever reason. So to win those people over, especially voters under 45, you have to actually speak to them with a real message, with a real fight, and have people around you that we can trust, that they can trust to fight for them. Now, let me show you something else, because we also got to go into all of Biden's issues. I'm not going to go into detail on all of them, but I'll mention some of the things that he's up against. But also, one of the most important polls right now is in enthusiasm. The enthusiasm gap between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Enthusiasm often predicts who is going to win the presidency. So, back in 2016, there was very low enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump's enthusiasm, his voters were more enthused for Donald Trump than Democratic voters were for Hillary Clinton. What happened? Donald Trump won. Right now, Joe Biden's enthusiasm numbers, right now they are 8 points lower than Hillary Clinton's lowest point in enthusiasm in 2016. So you see them here. Among Trump supporters, very high enthusiasm is 53%, somewhat 32%, not at all, 14%. For Biden, only 24% of people are very excited or very enthused for Joe Biden. 49% are somewhat, and 26% not at all. Again, lower numbers than Hillary Clinton. Actually, let me get to the ABC News piece on that. So there's deja vu in these results. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton found herself in largely the same position 4 years ago. She too had a slim lead among Democrats for the nomination and ran essentially evenly with Trump among registered voters. And she lagged in enthusiasm, with a low of 32% very enthusiastic in September 2016. Biden is 8 points under that mark now. Bad as Biden's enthusiasm score is, we've seen worse. As few as 17% of former Republican presidential nominee and Arizona Senator John McCain's supporters were very enthusiastic about his candidacy in 2008. And former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney saw 23% in 2012. The poor omen for Biden is that Clinton, McCain, and Romney all lost. This tells you everything. His enthusiasm, Biden's enthusiasm is incredibly low. And the only way you bring enthusiasm into the candidacy is if you bring the Bernie supporters, the energy, young people, into your base of support. And the only way you do that is with some concrete changes to who is around you, to who will staff your potential administration, including vice president. Now, we also have to, let me just mention some of the things that Biden is up against, which is why it's going to be a hard uphill battle for Joe Biden to actually win the nomination. Before I even get to any of these points here, the only way Joe Biden actually wins in November against Donald Trump, again, assuming he is the nominee, is if enough anti-Trump voters come out to vote. If there were enough people over 45, or let's say people in general, if there were enough anti-Trump voters in general that didn't vote for Hillary in 2016 because they assumed that she was going to win, so they didn't come out for her, if there are enough of those people that didn't come out last time that come out in 2020 and vote for Joe Biden to essentially vote against Donald Trump, then Biden has the potential to win. But if there aren't enough of those anti-Trump voters, then he's going to lose, unless he makes some of these real personnel changes. Because voters under 45, even in states that Bernie lost in big numbers, voters under 45 went with Bernie Sanders over Joe Biden. A lot of those people are not going to come out for Joe Biden. They just aren't. And a lot more of those people that would have come out, that maybe didn't come out in a primary for Bernie, but would have come out for him in a general, aren't going to come out for Joe Biden either. So he essentially has to ride on the anti-Trump vote unless he makes some of these real changes to his campaign. Now, let me just read some of this stuff off because I made a list here of some of the issues with Joe Biden. There's the credible Tara Reade allegation against him. I just did a video on that involving Alyssa Milano. Go check that out. Biden's poor track record when it comes to issues like the Iraq War, the bankruptcy bill, trade deals. These are all major issues for voters, especially when it comes to some of the Rust Belt states, trade deals especially. This is a huge issue for Joe Biden, an easy attack line for Trump and the Republicans. Biden's inadequate platform, especially when it comes to issues like climate change and healthcare. Biden still does not support Medicare for all, even in this pandemic. He still does not support a universal single-payer Medicare for all system. The Democratic voters are already there. In states that Bernie lost, again, in the most conservative states so far in the primary that Bernie lost to Joe Biden, Medicare for all still won in popularity in exit polls. A lot of people, in fact, think Joe Biden supports Medicare for all. So Medicare for all is so popular that they just assume that the most conservative guy in the race supports it when he doesn't. So at the very least, Biden has to back Medicare for all, but he has to go further and actually have people in his administration, in his campaign, that are actual fighters for Medicare for all. The last piece here that, of course, I have to mention, Biden's mental acuity. We see the problems with this every day. Joe Biden is just mentally not the same person he used to be. Let me just show you this really quick example. You can find a million of these examples. This is a more recent one. Let me just show you this quick one. It gives you an idea of what Joe Biden is often like.
We cannot let this, we've never allowed any crisis from the Civil War straight through to the pandemic of 17, all the way around 16. We have never let our democracy take second fiddle. We can both have a democracy and elections and at the same time correct the public health.
All right. That was just largely nonsense. This is Joe Biden. And if you notice, the video I showed you earlier, the first video I showed you, there were some quick cuts in that. That wasn't me. That was NBC. The Today Show cut that interview up. They pre-recorded it and cut it up to cut out, I imagine, a lot of those Joe Biden moments. So look, I'm not sure if they usually do that, but it was a pre-recorded interview, and they definitely cut out moments to shorten the interview and to make it, at the very least, be or seem like Biden's a little more mentally capable, or the more likely reason because they want to keep the interview short and they know Joe Biden can go on and on and on and not really say anything. So this is going to be one that, again, easy attack line for Trump and the Republicans. And all of these issues add up to a candidate that is an even worse candidate than Hillary Clinton was in 2016. And I did not think it was possible to put up a worse candidate than Hillary Clinton in 2016. But here we are. So Joe Biden has to take some real steps to actually win people over, win working class voters over, win young people over, win Sanders supporters over, or he's likely facing a major loss in November.